Hey, it's the Empire, Geoboxing Empire, back to boxing. Now, man, crazy news, man. My boy Gary Russell Jr. was interviewed by Trill Boxing, man, and Gary Russell shared a story, man, a sparring story. Yeah, it's funny because boxing, they always say that, what happens in sparring stays in sparring, but, those are the old days. The new niggas, the new guys, they tell everything, man. They show and tell everything. And apparently, man, Gary Russell said he broke Terrence Crawford's jaw. Now, from what I heard, what happened is they're sparring, Terrence Crawford and Gary Russell. And Gary Russell's getting the better of Terrence Crawford. The guy was boxing, he was moving. We all know Gary Russell Jr. is extremely quick with his hands. And he happened to move a little more with the combinations. And basically, I'm figuring that Gary Russell got the better of Terrence Crawford because after the sparring match, Terrence Crawford was like, yo, man, you're moving too much. You didn't fight me. Stop running and fight me. And, Terrence Crawford started getting full of himself after the sparring, basically getting hype on Gary Russell Jr. because he didn't stand and bang with him. So Gary Russell Jr., while Terrence Crawford was talking, he hit him in the jaw. Now, this is outside of sparring. This is the part outside of sparring after they finished. Terrence Crawford was talking out trash. But I guess when Terrence Crawford was talking out trash, Gary Russell hit him in the jaw. And when he did that, the guy broke his jaw. Now, this is wild stuff, man. Gary Russell Jr. has always been an incredible fighter. And, we never really see Gary Russell Jr. sit in his punches. The guy, he hits hard, but his bread and butter is a combination. And I heard this is earlier in the career, obviously. I believe this was in the amateurs. Correct me if I'm wrong. It could have been early years in their pro years. But, it's been long known that Gary Russell Jr. has had hand problems with his hands. And that being said, this could have been before Gary Russell had hand problems. And so that means, when he hit with a lot more conviction. And furthermore, I think when Gary Russell hit Terrence Crawford, it wasn't with the glove. So you could imagine the kind of damage it would have done to Terrence Crawford, So this is really big news, man. Gary Russell Jr. has been calling out all fighters from 126 all the way up to 147. He called out anyone, man. He called out AB. He called out Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence. He basically called everyone out. Javante Tank Davis. And he said, man, listen, I want these big fights, man. People got to fight me. And, I think Gary Russell really does deserve a really big fight because, out of his whole career, he came up short early in his career against Lomachenko. And, ever since then, he hasn't really had a big fight. So, after that fight, I guess he had some contenders or a really tough opposition. They're for titles and everything. Some solid opponents like Johnny Gonzalez and Kiko Martinez. I know for sure those are two really good wins on his record. But, he hasn't had a real opportunity to fight another superstar that's on his level. Like Carl Frampton, like Rigondeaux, etc., etc. So we're going to see how this whole thing plays out, man. Terrence Crawford is definitely going to respond because this is big news. Yeah, man. I'm glad this quarantine happened because a lot of these fighters are really starting to act, and they're starting to basically, get in touch with social media and talking to the people really making content every day, and really, they're on the grind. A lot of times these fighters think that, they're just going to get promoted by their main promoter. And, during this quarantine, no one can really go anywhere, so you can't have a full crew go out there and interview you. You're going to have to talk to people online. You're going to have to get more interactive. You're going to have to start talking to people. And, I'm glad that Gary Russell Jr. is talking to people like Trill Boxing Talk, because Trill Boxing Talk, his demographic is mostly black people, and most of the top boxers are black. So, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., Keith One-Time Thurman, Sean Porter, I can go on and on. So this is a really big deal, man. It keeps everything compact. It keeps everything centered around talking to the people who talks about boxing every day. If you talk about boxing every day and you have your own channel, you're basically a hardcore fan at that point. If anything, the content creator is doing the fighter a service. He's not paying some promoter 20% of his purse. This guy will, a content creator will gladly do it for free. He'd be glad to just talk to you. So, Gary Russell Jr. Is lucky to have someone like a Trill Boxing Talk to even talk to really put him on his platform. Gary Russell should be thanking him. He should be thanking him. Let me know how you guys feel about it, though, man. I thought this was a big deal. Terrence Crawford chin checked, and I guess he failed that test. Let me know how you guys feel about it, though. Would you guys still like to see a Terrence Crawford versus Gary Russell Jr., or maybe like a Gary Russell Jr. versus like someone like a Ryan Garcia, a speed for speed? That'd be a good fight. Let's see something different. Gary Russell definitely deserves to be in a big fight. The guy is just, has been screwed his whole career. People talk about Rigondeaux, but Rigondeaux has had a couple of chances, more chances than a Gary Russell Jr. Gary Russell Jr. has not had those chances. Let me know how you guys feel about it, though. Like, comment, subscribe. This is the Empire. Geoboxing Empire. Peace.